On a cold February morning in 2018, a New York financial broker named Daniel Mercer never arrived at his office on Wall Street. His absence was first brushed off as stress leave, the kind common in a city where fortunes collapse overnight. Yet by that evening, his wife reported him missing, and detectives walked into a Manhattan apartment that looked untouched, except for one detail. His laptop was still powered on, its screen frozen on a series of trades no one could explain. For weeks, colleagues whispered that Mercer had vanished with millions. But years later, in a sealed courtroom, the truth would surface in the form of a single USB drive and the name of a man far wealthier than Mercer himself. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from today, and if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. The morning light on Wall Street had its own rhythm, bouncing off glass towers, spilling into narrow streets where couriers carried coffee and traders checked their screens before the opening bell. Monday, February 12, 2018, unfolded with that same steady pulse, except one broker was absent. Daniel Mercer, 36 years old, had not shown up at the office by 9 a.m. No one paid much attention at first. Absence was common in a world measured by exhaustion and overwork. But by noon, his empty chair drew longer looks. By 2 p.m., with the markets grinding forward and his phone still silent, whispers circled the trading floor. At 4 p.m., when the bell rang and screens dimmed, Clara Mercer called the precinct. Her voice was calm at first, rehearsed, the voice of a woman who still believed her husband might walk through the door at any moment. She reported that Daniel had left for work the previous evening, promising he would return late after wrapping things up. He had not returned at all. The detective on duty, Lieutenant Raymond Hale, listened, wrote the details down in block letters, and assigned 2 officers to meet her at the Mercer apartment in Lower Manhattan. The building was quiet, carpet muted in beige, security cameras fixed on the elevators. Clara let them in with hands that trembled only when she placed the keys back in her pocket. The apartment smelled of stale coffee. Nothing appeared disturbed. Jackets hung neatly, shoes aligned by the wall. On the dining table sat a folded newspaper, untouched since Saturday. It was the office that unsettled them. The blinds were half drawn, leaving slats of gray light across the desk. Daniel's phone rested on top, battery drained, no outgoing calls after 7 a.m. the previous day. His leather briefcase leaned against the chair, still zipped, but the laptop glowed. The screen had locked itself, yet faint blue light pulsed beneath the password prompt. A sticky note beside the keyboard bore nothing but a single scribble, 10:03 p.m. Clara said she had not written it. Hale ordered the machine bagged and logged for forensic review. Inside the desk drawer, between paper clips and stray receipts, sat a small silver USB drive. It looked ordinary, a common promotional stick. One officer picked it up, held it to the light, and set it aside. They photographed it, tagged it, then returned it to the drawer. At that stage, it seemed irrelevant, no more important than a pen cap or empty envelope. Hale moved through each room slowly, recording details. No broken locks, no forced entry. Refrigerators stocked with leftovers, dishes rinsed. The bed unmade as if Daniel had slept, risen early and left in haste. Clara explained he often worked nights from home, staring into the glow of spreadsheets until exhaustion caught him. By 7 p.m., the apartment was sealed with evidence tape. Detectives canvassed the neighbors. One remembered hearing footsteps in the hall around midnight, quick and uneven. Another mentioned the faint click of a door closing at dawn. None had seen Daniel leave. Back at the precinct, Hale reviewed the first sweep. The missing man was not carrying his phone, his briefcase, or even his coat. February wind bit hard in Manhattan. Leaving without a coat suggested either compulsion or coercion. At 9 p.m., Clara sat in the interview room, her cardigan pulled tight, answering each question with careful precision. No, Daniel had not spoken of disappearing. Yes, he had been tense the past month. He avoided conversations about money. He told her only that things would settle soon. The detective noted her pauses, her measured tone. Grief had not arrived yet, only confusion. She clutched a house key as she spoke, rolling it between her fingers as if it were the last solid thing she could hold. When she finally left the station, the file labeled Mercer, Daniel, missing person, rested on Hale's desk. A photograph clipped to the corner showed a man with short, dark hair, sharp jaw, brown eyes that revealed little. Nothing about the image hinted at scandal. Nothing warned of what the laptop would reveal. By midnight, an evidence technician powered the machine. The password yielded quickly. A family birthday, simple and careless for a man immersed in finance. The screen sprang to life. Rows of trades scrolled across. Timestamps frozen at the very hours Daniel should have been asleep. The numbers looked routine to an untrained eye, but the amounts were staggering. Tens of millions shifted through shell accounts, executed under Mercer's credentials. Hale leaned closer. The trades had not been settled. They remained open, dangling like unfinished sentences, the kind that invite scrutiny. A broker vanishes, his phone left behind, his laptop humming with suspicious activity. The technician logged each screen capture, sealed them in a digital evidence vault. Hale signed off, his pen scratching against the form. He wrote one note in the margin: disappearance linked to unauthorized transactions. Outside, the city wind sharpened, scattering papers along the empty avenue. Somewhere beyond those towers, Daniel Mercer had stepped out of sight. The first day closed not with an answer, but with a glow from a laptop that refused to go dark. The last line on Hale's daily report was stark, underlined twice. The screen showed trades that should never have existed. The second day of a missing persons case always carried weight. After 24 hours, routine explanations grew thin. Daniel Mercer had not used his bank cards, had not accessed his Metro Pass, had not placed a single call. By 9 a.m. Tuesday, Lieutenant Hale walked into the Mercer apartment again, this time with a crime scene photographer and a forensic specialist. The apartment looked the same. Curtains drawn, silence held in place. But under the camera's flash, small details emerged. Dust patterns on the desk showed a phone charger moved recently. A coffee mug carried a ring of liquid dried unevenly, as though lifted in haste. Clara stood aside, arms folded, watching strangers handle her husband's life with latex gloves. Detectives searched the drawers again. In the top drawer, they found receipts, groceries, dry cleaning, one slip from a taxi service. The slip bore a timestamp, 9:45 p.m. Sunday night. Clara swore Daniel had returned home that evening, telling her he needed to prepare for Monday. But the taxi route printed on the paper began at a midtown hotel and ended blocks away from the Mercer building. She had no explanation. Hale kept the slip, circled it with his pen, and placed it in an envelope. The desk chair faced the laptop like a stage set left mid-scene. Hale sat briefly, staring at the blank screen. He imagined Mercer there, scrolling numbers, eyes flicking between columns, while outside the city slept. Neighbors offered little. One retired teacher recalled hearing the elevator stop on their floor close to 10 p.m. Another said the hallway light flickered that same night, something it had not done before or since. Each memory was vague, unreliable, but Hale wrote them down anyway. Back at the office, Hale began building a timeline. The taxi receipt contradicted Clara's account. Mercer had either lied about returning home early or someone else used his name. Either way, 9:45 p.m. placed him in motion. In the evening, Hale summoned Adrian Cole, a fellow broker. Adrian arrived in a tailored coat, his expression tired but alert. He admitted Mercer had been under strain. He stayed late, Adrian said. But we all do. He was protective, secretive lately. Took calls outside, canceled drinks, said he was working on something that couldn't wait. When asked about Sunday night, Adrian hesitated. He left with his laptop, said he'd run simulations from home. I didn't see him after. Hale pressed further. Adrian mentioned that Mercer sometimes met contacts at a bar near Grand Central. Old wood booths, brass lamps. He liked it quiet. The bar offered another thread. Detectives visited at 8 p.m., a time Mercer supposedly favored. The bartender remembered him, a man who paid in cash, ordered whiskey neat, and left after short conversations with men in dark suits. He always looked over his shoulder, the bartender added. like he was waiting for someone to follow. Meanwhile, Clara searched through Daniel's belongings herself. In a shelf stacked with financial manuals, she discovered a slip of paper folded inside the spine of a book. It bore nothing but a series of digits, 12 numbers aligned like an account code. She carried it to Hale without knowing its meaning. He copied it, stored it, placed it with the taxi slip in the growing file. That night, Hale returned home with the image of Mercer's office still in his mind. The apartment had no chaos, no violence, just a vacuum where a man should have been. The most ordinary objects, phone, briefcase, receipts, had become louder than any witness. As Hale closed the file for the night, one question remained louder than the rest. Why leave behind a phone in plain sight, drained of power, as if meant to be found? The case was shifting, from absence into anomaly. From a man who vanished to a man who left trails too precise, too curated. And in the drawer still tagged as routine, the silver USB waited, ignored. The note in Hale's ledger ended simply. The paper hid numbers no one could yet explain. Wednesday morning brought gray skies to Manhattan, the kind that flattened the city into steel and concrete. Lieutenant Hale arrived early at the precinct, carrying the Mercer file beneath his arm. The folder was already thick. Taxi receipts, scribbled account numbers, neighbor statements that blurred with uncertainty. What it lacked was direction. A missing man's life scattered across paper, but no body, no suspect, no resolution. Clara appeared at 10 a.m., pale from sleepless nights. She carried a worn planner, leather corners frayed. "He kept everything here," she said, sliding it across the table. Inside were pages marked with precise handwriting. Meetings, reminders, appointments. The days leading up to his disappearance showed a routine that bent strangely at the edges. Lunches canceled, calls rescheduled, notes like Midtown 7 and Grand Central, check. None of them included names. The planner became a map, pointing toward places Mercer moved in secrecy. Hale assigned a pair of detectives to retrace his path, starting with the bar near Grand Central. The bartender confirmed again. Mercer had been there twice that week, meeting with a woman in a navy coat, sharp voice, ordered gin without hesitation. She paid in cash and never left a name. By noon, a subpoena landed on Hale's desk. Mercer's financials. The documents revealed a pattern impossible to ignore. Over the last 3 months, large sums had moved between his personal accounts and offshore holdings linked to shell corporations. Transfers were deliberate, layered, as if someone meant to obscure their origin. Hale tapped the lines with his pen, noting the destination, an island bank known more for secrecy than solvency. He called Clara back into the room. She shook her head at the figures. "We lived comfortably," she insisted. "But nothing like this. He never told me." She pressed her palm against the table, as though steadying herself against a wave she could not see. Forensic accountants began combing through the transfers. Each led to another shell, a chain that circled back into silence. But one entry stood out. A sum of $5 million wired to an entity with Mercer's initials embedded in its code. It suggested not theft by another, but design from within. That evening, Hale examined the laptop again. It showed not just trades, but emails saved in drafts, unsent. One read, "Compliance won't cover this. Too deep already. Meet tomorrow." The date aligned with his last known night. Hale circled the line, clipped it into the evidence report. Clara, meanwhile, recounted small details she had ignored before. Daniel arriving home late, slipping a manila envelope into the bedroom closet, locking the door behind him. When she checked after his disappearance, the envelope was gone. Its contents unknown. The detectives followed this memory like a lead. They searched the apartment again, pulling clothes from shelves, opening drawers, scanning for hidden compartments. They found nothing, except the USB still waiting in its plastic bag, cataloged but unopened. Adrian Cole reappeared under questioning. His tone sharpened when asked about Mercer's finances. He admitted Daniel confided stress about losses, debts that could not be explained to the firm. "But he said he had a solution," Adrian muttered, glancing away. "Something outside normal channels." Pressed further, He described Daniel scribbling numbers onto scraps of paper, folding them into his wallet. He wouldn't let anyone see. Hale now carried 3 threads. The taxi slip suggesting movement, the planner mapping secret meetings, and the bank records proving hidden wealth. They did not align neatly, but together they formed a shadow of intent. Late that night, alone in his office, Hale wrote in his notebook, "Not a disappearance, a transaction." He stared at the USB drive sealed in its evidence bag. Its silver casing reflected the fluorescent light. Nothing extraordinary. Yet the longer it sat untouched, the more it seemed to pulse with meaning. By 11 p.m., the precinct lights dimmed. The city outside swelled with noise, sirens, horns, the endless churn of New York refusing to sleep. In the silence of his office, Hale closed the Mercer file and leaned back, unsettled. Some vanishings carried the raw stamp of violence. Blood on the floor, a body in the alley. This one carried numbers, slips of paper, and a glowing screen. Mercer had not been erased in the dark. He had been swallowed by figures no one yet understood. The section ended in Hale's logbook with a line underlined twice. Camera showed Mercer entering the subway, never emerging again. Thursday morning, the investigation shifted from a missing person to something heavier. Lieutenant Hale stood in the financial district lobby of Mercer's firm, the glass revolving doors spinning brokers in and out, voices rising with market chatter. Upstairs, in the controlled quiet of the compliance department, he was handed a folder of IT logs. The entries were clinical. Timestamps, IP addresses, account names. One detail cut through. At 11:45 p.m. on the night Mercer disappeared, his credentials logged into a restricted account, one reserved for senior partners. Mercer was not authorized to enter. The IT manager, a pale man with a nervous cough, insisted there must be a mistake. But the digital trail was undeniable. The login originated from Mercer's apartment. Hale underlined the entry in red. That was not a disappearance. It was a step into forbidden territory. When he returned to the precinct, Clara sat waiting. Her eyes were red but steady. She had remembered something. Daniel often carried a silver USB in his pocket, she said. Not the work-issued kind, but one he claimed was personal. He never let her near it. Hale thought of the stick tagged and stored, still unopened. He wrote a single note. USB Sigel's key. By afternoon, he turned his attention to Adrian Cole. The colleague looked more unsettled now, hands restless against the table. Hale asked about the restricted login. Adrian's face tightened. Daniel said he was checking something for a client, a backdoor check. Hale pressed harder. Adrian admitted they had argued weeks before. Daniel accused him of leaking information, of being too close to certain investors. He wasn't himself, Adrian muttered, always scanning rooms, as if waiting for someone to follow. The detectives walked Adrian through the planner notes, the bar meetings. He confirmed at least one, a woman named Selena Ortiz, a junior broker with ties to overseas accounts. She and Mercer had argued in the lobby one evening, their voices sharp enough to turn heads. Selena was now missing from her office schedule. Hale marked her name. That night, Clara called again. She had found something tucked inside Daniel's coat, the one left untouched in the apartment. A folded slip torn from lined paper with a scrawled phrase, "Mercer Exit Plan." Hale froze. That name had surfaced before, buried in the IT logs, a file directory. He requested full forensic imaging. At 9 p.m., the USB was placed under lab light. The surface carried faint scratches, as though often inserted and removed. Technicians cloned its contents. Rows of files appeared, many empty, some encrypted. One folder bore the name identical to the slip, Mercer Exit Plan. Inside, fragments of spreadsheets, account codes, and references to transfers exceeding $50 million. The pattern was deliberate, small amounts over weeks, then larger bursts, all terminating offshore. The deeper they looked, the clearer it became. Mercer was not vanishing into the night by accident. He had built an exit route, digital and financial. Whether he intended to step into it or had been forced was still unclear. Hale sat with Clara afterward. explaining as carefully as possible. Her face hardened with each word. "Daniel wasn't a thief," she said quietly. "He wanted out. He told me once he was tired of being swallowed by numbers." But her voice faltered when she saw the evidence reports. The USB did not lie. The search widened to Selena Ortiz. Detectives traced her to a midtown apartment. She had vacated the lease days earlier. Neighbors recalled hurried packing at dawn, suitcases rattling down the hall. In her trash, they found shredded documents. Among the fragments, one partial email header: "Compliance notice. Unusual transfers." The letter had never been sent. Hale bagged the scraps, taped them together in the lab, and added them to the growing pile. Now the picture sharpened. Mercer, locked into secret meetings, logging into forbidden systems, storing coded files on a silver stick. Selena, tied to the same threads, fleeing before questions arrived. Adrian, caught in half-truths, anxious under scrutiny. Yet Mercer himself remained invisible. No body, no voice, only traces. The subway cameras showed him entering but never leaving. Somewhere between those tiled corridors and the city above, he had been erased. The detectives closed the day staring at the USB contents. The glow of spreadsheets cast pale light across the evidence room. Each row of numbers was a whisper, a breadcrumb, leading deeper into a system designed to stay hidden. When Hale wrote his log that night, he underlined 3 words. The file was named Exit Plan. Friday arrived with a thin drizzle washing Wall Street in silver light. The Mercer case had moved beyond the precinct's missing persons board. Now it rested on the desks of financial crimes investigators. Lieutenant Hale carried the USB report into a meeting with federal agents. They sat around a long table, fluorescent lights buzzing, papers spread like a second skin. At the center was the printout of those strange spreadsheets. Rows of coded transfers, looping from one shell account to another, finishing in banks where secrecy was the only service provided. The agents spoke in clipped tones. "This isn't just a disappearance," one of them said. "It's infrastructure." They explained how the trades resembled layering, a method to launder money through legitimate channels. Mercer's name appeared only at the margins, but his credentials, his laptop, his midnight logins stitched the pattern together. By mid-afternoon, Hale stepped back into the city. He needed context, human rather than digital. He returned to the Midtown bar where Mercer had held his quiet meetings. This time, the bartender remembered more. "There was a woman," he said. "Dark hair, navy coat, sharp. She called him Dan, like she'd known him for years, but she wasn't affectionate. She was pressing him. I thought they were arguing about a deadline." Hale showed him a photo of Selena Ortiz. The bartender nodded without hesitation. Detectives began canvassing hotels in the area. At a front desk near Bryant Park, a clerk recalled a reservation under Ortiz's name. Paid in cash, room vacated 3 days earlier. Surveillance stills showed her with a slim folder under her arm. No sign of Mercer, but the clerk mentioned she had asked repeatedly for late checkout, as if waiting for someone who never came. Haley pressed Adrian Cole again. Adrian finally admitted he had seen Ortiz and Mercer together in the firm's lobby, voices hushed, eyes darting. "She was in over her head," Adrian said. "He told me once she carried papers that could ruin careers, but he said it like a warning, not admiration." Later that evening, a technician handed Hale a single sheet, a partially recovered email from the USB. The draft was titled Compliance Notice, Unsent, but the wording was precise. Suspicious trades linked to offshore entities. Internal reporting required. The language mirrored the scraps found in Ortiz's trash. 2 drafts, nearly identical, suggesting they had worked in tandem. Hale now saw a fragile alliance. Mercer and Ortiz gathering evidence, but also weaving themselves into the same transactions they sought to expose. It was impossible to know if they were whistleblowers, opportunists, or both. Clara returned to the precinct at dusk. She carried a photograph of Daniel at their wedding, suit crisp, expression guarded but proud. She placed it on the table, staring at it while Hale explained the offshore accounts. Her face remained unreadable. "He wanted to protect us," she whispered. If he made mistakes, it was because he thought there was no other way. Hale listened but wrote his own note. Motive equals survival, not greed. By 8 p.m., detectives searched Mercer's office at the firm again. In a drawer of neatly stacked client files, they found a thin envelope misfiled under a false name. Inside was a photocopy of a contract, an investment agreement bearing the signature of Elliot Brandt, a wealthy investor known for discreet deals. The contract was not recorded in official ledgers. Hale tucked it into an evidence sleeve. That night, under the glow of the evidence room, the silver USB sat once more at the center. Its data had begun to form a network: transfers, draft emails, a contract linking back to Elliot Brandt. Mercer's disappearance no longer looked like escape. It looked like removal. Still, the question lingered. Removal by whom? Hale closed his notebook with a line that chilled even his steady hand. On the USB, a Cayman account waited, numbers bold as a signature. Saturday opened with low clouds over Manhattan, the kind that made skyscrapers look unfinished, their tops lost in mist. Lieutenant Hale arrived at the precinct before dawn. He spread the Mercer evidence across the table: the taxi receipt, the planner notes, the offshore transfers, the contract bearing Elliot Brandt's signature. In the center lay the silver USB drive, its scratched casing reflecting the desk lamp like a mirror that refused to tell the truth. Clara Mercer entered quietly, cardigan clutched tight against her shoulders. She carried a memory that had surfaced in the night. Weeks before Daniel vanished, he had come home with a sealed manila envelope. He slid it into the closet, told her not to touch it, and locked the door. After his disappearance, she checked. The envelope was gone. Hale asked what it contained. She shook her head. All he said was it wasn't for me to worry about. Hale's detectives retraced Mercer's final days. At the firm, they uncovered an internal meeting scheduled the Friday before he disappeared. Attendance logs showed his name penciled in, but the digital file had been altered. Someone had overwritten it, replacing Mercer with another junior associate. The ink on the printed schedule told a different story. Mercer had been expected in a closed meeting that never appeared on official records. The alteration reeked of intent. Hale photographed the log, compared handwriting, and ordered it preserved. By afternoon, pressure mounted. Adrian Cole was brought back in. His composure cracked under Hale's questions. Finally, he confessed that Mercer had warned him of something larger. He said they were using us, Adrian muttered. Moving money through the firm, transactions dressed up as trades. He said he had proof. Hale asked if proof meant the USB. Adrian nodded, eyes down. He showed me once, just numbers, lines of them. He said if it ever came out, lives would be ruined. The detective pressed harder. Who was they? Adrian hesitated, then whispered a name: Elliot Brandt. Daniel said Brandt wasn't investing, he was laundering. At 5 p.m., the forensic team cracked more of the USB encryption. Buried among the spreadsheets was a sequence of 37 entries marked with identical tags. Each represented a transfer routed through Brandt's entities, all disguised as client trades. The amounts were staggering, totaling more than $50 million. The discovery shifted the case. Mercer was no longer just missing. He was a broker carrying evidence capable of toppling reputations. Whether he had been complicit or coerced remained unclear, but the USB suggested his final hours were tied to betrayal. That night, Hale revisited the bar near Grand Central. The bartender remembered another detail. The last time Mercer came in, a man in a gray coat sat with him briefly. They exchanged no drinks, only a sealed envelope. Mercer tucked it into his jacket and left. The description did not match Adrian or Brandt, but pointed to another middleman, unseen until now. Clara listened to the revelations with a mixture of pain and clarity. He wanted out, she said. He told me once, Clara, numbers can bury you or free you. I didn't understand then. The man who vanished had been building something, an exit perhaps, or a shield. Yet that same construction made him a target. At 11 p.m., under the hum of fluorescent lights, technicians cataloged the evidence. Altered meeting logs, offshore transfers, the unsigned compliance drafts. the contract with Brandt's signature, and the USB's 37 fraudulent trades. Each was a fragment of a larger shape forming in the shadows. Hale wrote his daily note in sharp letters. The USB revealed 37 trades that never should have existed. Sunday mornings in Manhattan were quieter, the streets emptied of commuters, towers standing still in the gray. Lieutenant Hale stood outside the federal building, briefcase heavy with evidence. The Mercer file had grown too large for the precinct alone. Now the Bureau's Financial Crimes Division wanted in. Inside, a team of agents waited, their suits pressed, their expressions as blank as the marble walls. Hale placed the silver USB on the table. Its contents were projected onto a screen. Rows of trades, 37 fraudulent moves, each routed through entities linked to Elliot Brandt. The agents spoke in precise language, dissecting layering, placement, and integration, the mechanics of laundering. Yet beyond the jargon, one truth cut through. Mercer had uncovered or facilitated a network of illicit money, and now Mercer himself was gone. By noon, subpoenas were drafted. Brandt's holdings were mapped. Clara sat in an adjoining room, listening as lawyers debated whether her husband was a criminal or a victim. Her silence carried more weight than words. She held her wedding band with both hands, twisting it slowly, eyes fixed on nothing. That afternoon, Hale returned to the firm, this time with federal backing. Adrian Cole was escorted to an interview room. He looked exhausted, skin pale, lips dry. "You don't understand," he said, voice shaking. "Daniel wanted to expose it. He thought the USB would protect him. But once they knew he had it, he was finished." Hale pressed him. Who were they? Adrian finally admitted that Brandt had confronted Daniel weeks earlier, warning him to forget the numbers. Adrian had been present, watching from a distance, too frightened to intervene. "Daniel wasn't greedy," Adrian said. "He was scared, but he thought he could use the data to bargain his way out." The narrative tilted. Mercer had not simply built an exit plan, he had crafted leverage. The 37 trades were not just evidence, but currency. He believed they could shield him. Instead, they marked him. Later, Clara was shown fragments from the USB, scanned signatures, contracts, wiring slips. Her face crumpled at the sight of Daniel's digital footprints embedded in the mess. "He thought he was strong enough," she whispered, "but he was alone." At 6 p.m., federal agents raided one of Brandt's office suites. Behind polished doors and modern art, they found filing cabinets crammed with duplicates of the same contracts Mercer had stored. One drawer contained binders labeled with innocuous project names, but inside, each binder tracked flows of money to offshore accounts. Brandt was arrested for questioning. His reaction was cold fury, promising lawyers would dismantle every charge. That night, Hale sat in the precinct, typing his notes. Forensic analysts confirmed the digital signatures on the USB matched Brandt's encrypted accounts. The evidence was tightening, but the man at the center, Mercer, remained absent, his body unlocated, his voice silenced. Still, his presence lingered in every file, every receipt, every line of numbers. Clara visited Hale before leaving, her voice firm despite exhaustion. "Whatever they say, remember, Daniel came home to me every night until the end. He wanted to walk away, he just didn't know how." Hale nodded, though doubt pressed at the edges. Walking away in finance was rarely permitted. At 10 p.m., as the day closed, Hale wrote in his ledger. On the USB, a scanned passport appeared. Mercer's name, but not his face. Monday morning broke under a heavy sky, the East River glinting dull beneath low clouds. Lieutenant Hale arrived at the precinct with a new lead clutched in his file. The scanned passport discovered on the USB showed Daniel Mercer's name, but the photograph was of a stranger. The counterfeit bore the watermark of a European consulate, and it carried a departure stamp dated the day after Mercer vanished. Hale walked the evidence into a meeting with Bureau agents. They parsed every pixel, confirming the document was fabricated. Yet its inclusion on Mercer's USB was deliberate. It suggested a plan, escape through falsified identity. But escape to where? The file pointed to Geneva. By noon, Hale was at JFK Airport with Port Authority officials. They pulled boarding logs for flights to Switzerland in the 48 hours after Mercer's disappearance. One record surfaced: a boarding pass purchased in cash, under Mercer's name, for a flight to Zurich. Yet the airline system showed no scan of that passenger entering the jetway. The seat remained empty. Someone had printed the pass, but Mercer had never left the ground. Back at the precinct, Clara was informed. She listened without blinking. "Daniel hated flying," she murmured. "If he bought that ticket, it wasn't to use it. It was for show." She recalled his habit of leaving decoys, empty folders, false calendars, to mislead competitors. Hale scribbled her words down. Decoy ticket equals misdirection. The investigation widened into the days after Mercer's disappearance. Surveillance from Lower Manhattan showed a grainy frame. 1 a.m., a black sedan idling near Wall Street. A man with Daniel's build was seen struggling near the back door, then pushed inside. The license plate was unreadable in the haze. That clip became the new anchor. Mercer had not walked away. He had been taken. Attention turned back to Elliot Brandt. His arrest had rattled the financial community. His lawyers moved swiftly, arguing the USB was fabricated, a plant designed to smear him. Yet the contracts seized from his office mirrored those on the drive. Forensic comparison showed identical digital watermarks. The defense weakened. Still, the body was absent, and Brandt's attorneys pressed the question: if Mercer was the victim, where was he? Without that answer, every charge could be blurred by doubt. Hale returned to Clara with the grim reality. "We may never find him," he admitted. She stood by the window, staring at the city lights. "Then find what he left," she said, "because he didn't vanish into nothing. Daniel always left something behind." That night, Hale revisited the USB with technicians. In a hidden folder, buried under encrypted layers, they unearthed correspondence, scans of letters addressed to a compliance officer, unsigned drafts, never mailed. Mercer had been preparing a whistleblower package. He was documenting not only the trades but the mechanics behind them, line by line. As if rehearsing testimony he would never deliver. The discovery reframed everything. Mercer had not been complicit. He had been compiling proof, weaponizing numbers into evidence. The decoy ticket, the forged passport, the sealed envelope, all pieces of a shield that failed. At 11 p.m., Hale wrote in his logbook, hand steady despite the weight. CCTV showed Mercer forced into a black car near Wall Street. Tuesday dawned sharp and cold, the city caught in the glare of winter sun. Lieutenant Hale drove to Brooklyn, following a new lead from traffic cameras. The black sedan seen near Wall Street had been traced to an abandoned lot beneath the shadow of the Williamsburg Bridge. Detectives approached the vehicle with gloves and flashlights. Its doors were locked, dust gathering on the windows, but the trunk latch hung crooked, as if forced shut in haste. When they pried it open, the air inside was stale. Shredded papers scattered across the lining, fragments of contracts torn into strips. On the driver's seat, faint brown flecks marked the fabric. A quick swab confirmed the obvious: blood. Forensic testing later tied the sample to Daniel Mercer. The find ignited headlines. By noon, news outlets declared the missing broker's story darker than Disappearance. Wall Street fraud turns violent, one banner read. Clara watched coverage from her apartment, face pale, voice gone quiet. She told Hale later, "I wanted proof he was alive. Now all I have is proof he bled." The evidence spread across the lot floor under fluorescent lamps. Among the shredded papers, one corner remained legible. A signature line, Elliot Brandt's name etched clear. The fragment joined the growing chain binding Mercer's fate to Brandt's empire. Hale presented the discovery in court hearings that week. Brandt's lawyers objected furiously, calling it planted, fabricated, irrelevant, without a body. Yet the jury of public opinion shifted. The image of an abandoned car with Mercer's blood carried more weight than arguments. Adrian Cole was summoned again. The pressure broke him. He admitted that days before Mercer vanished, Daniel had confided he was being followed. He said they were closing in. He told me if anything happened, the USB would speak for him. Adrian's eyes brimmed with guilt. "I should have gone to the police sooner. The Bureau now labeled Mercer's case as financial homicide. But Hale knew it was more than a crime of numbers. It was a silencing. A man who built a record too dangerous to surface had been erased, leaving only data behind. That night, Clara sat in the evidence room, staring at the silver USB sealed in its bag. "He touched this every day," she whispered. "Now it's all that's left of him." Her fingers hovered near the plastic, never quite resting on it. In Hale's notes, one line closed the entry. The car held Mercer's blood, but no trace of his body. Wednesday's sky was clear, a hard blue over Manhattan. But inside the federal courthouse, the air was heavy. The Mercer case had moved from investigation into proceedings. Lieutenant Hale walked into the chamber carrying two sealed exhibits: the silver USB drive and the contents of the abandoned car. The room buzzed with journalists, their pens ready to frame the story as the fall of a financier rather than the silencing of a witness. The judge called the first exhibit forward. Technicians displayed scans from the USB, 37 fraudulent trades, contracts bearing Elliot Brandt's digital signature, drafts of whistleblower letters Mercer never mailed. The files appeared in sequence, each projection colder than the last. The jury leaned closer, their faces lit by the glow of evidence Mercer had left behind. Brandt's defense struck back, insisting the USB was a forgery, planted to incriminate him. But then, the second exhibit arrived. The car fragments, shredded contracts pieced together in the lab, revealed Brandt's name again. The blood swabbed from the driver's seat matched Mercer's DNA. The chain of connection tightened. In the gallery, Clara sat rigid, hands folded around a tissue she never raised to her face. She watched as her husband's absence filled the courtroom through objects and documents, each detail cutting him deeper into silence. Adrian Cole stepped into the witness box. His testimony shook as he recounted Mercer's final weeks. He described secret meetings, arguments in firm hallways, the envelope passed in a bar. He told the jury Mercer had believed the USB could buy his safety. "He thought it would protect him," Adrian said, voice trembling. "But once they knew he had it, he was doomed." The prosecution then unveiled the final piece, a safety deposit box registered under Mercer's name, opened days before his disappearance. Inside were investment contracts linking Brandt to offshore accounts. Some bore fresh ink, others were copies Mercer had smuggled out of company files. The box had been overlooked until a clerk flagged the rental overdue. The weight of the evidence bore down. Brandt's expression remained stone, but the defense faltered. Each objection sounded thinner than the last. As proceedings closed that day, Hale lingered near the exhibits. The silver USB glinted under fluorescent light, a simple object elevated into the fulcrum of a case. He thought of Mercer, building an exit from numbers and codes, only to vanish into the same machinery he tried to expose. The judge ordered the trial to proceed with Brandt bound over for full charges. The words echoed in the chamber, sealing the path forward. When Hale wrote his notes that night, he closed with a stark line. The contract in the vault bore Brandt's name in black ink. Thursday morning, the courtroom was filled before the doors opened. Reporters crowded the marble steps, lenses ready, pens sharpened. The case of Elliot Brandt was no longer a financial matter. It had become a theater of power. Lieutenant Hale took his usual place at the prosecution table, the Mercer file thick with months of paper, each sheet weighed down by absence. The prosecution began with the USB. The silver stick was displayed in its plastic bag, passed carefully to a technician who explained its imaging process, checksum validations, and recovery of hidden folders. Each word carried the weight of certainty. 37 trades, tagged and logged, were confirmed as Mercer's credentials. Screenshots projected across the courtroom showed timestamps fixed at the hours he was last seen alive. The defense attempted to fracture the narrative. They claimed Mercer had fabricated the data, desperate to cover personal debts. But forensic analysts countered, pointing to embedded metadata, server timestamps, cryptographic signatures, that proved the files originated within Brandt's infrastructure. Lies unraveled beneath technical precision. Adrian Cole returned to the stand, shoulders stooped, hands trembling. He confessed the full story. Mercer had confided that he was preparing to blow the whistle. Adrian described seeing him one evening, pale and shaken, clutching the USB. He told me if I ever heard he was gone to tell the truth. The courtroom fell silent at the words. The defense fired back, painting Mercer as unstable, reckless. But then came the paper evidence. Contracts pulled from Brandt's office, shredded pages from the car, and documents in the safety deposit box. All bore his name. The signatures aligned, ink strokes identical, forensic examiners confirming authenticity. Clara Mercer was called last. She walked to the stand with deliberate steps, a plain blouse under her cardigan. Her eyes ringed by nights of grief. She spoke little. She told the jury about Daniel's sleepless weeks, his guarded phone calls, his final words the night before he vanished. After tomorrow, it will be over. Her voice cracked but did not falter. In closing, the prosecution lifted the silver USB and held it for the jury. "This," the attorney said, "is the voice of Daniel Mercer. Silenced in life, he speaks through numbers. And every number leads here, to Elliot Brandt." The jury deliberated long into the evening. Hale remained in the chamber, watching the USB resting on the table, light bouncing cold against its scratched casing. Hours later, the jurors returned. Their verdict was swift: guilty on multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit homicide. Brandt's face did not change, but the room seemed to exhale. The judge pronounced a sentence of 25 years, the maximum allowed. The words landed like steel doors shutting. Clara closed her eyes. For her, justice was not victory. It was survival. Her husband was still gone. That night, Hale wrote in his logbook, pen cutting deep into the page. The verdict fell, but Mercer's chair remained empty. Friday morning came with a pale winter sun cutting through the courthouse windows. The trial was over. Elliot Brandt had been led away in chains, his lawyers silent. Their arguments collapsed under the weight of numbers Mercer had left behind. Yet the case did not close clean. Daniel Mercer's body had never been recovered. For Clara, justice was measured in absence. She walked down the courthouse steps slowly, past reporters calling her name, past flashing cameras that sought a tear or a headline. She gave them nothing. In her bag was the notice from the court. The USB drive, cataloged as Exhibit A, would remain in federal custody indefinitely. To her, it was both proof and tombstone. Inside the evidence vault, the USB was sealed in a box with other artifacts: the taxi receipt, the planner pages, the shredded contracts pieced back together. The car had long since been towed away, but photographs of its blood-stained seat were filed permanently in the record. Each object told a fragment of a story without its final chapter. Lieutenant Hale filed his closing report. He detailed the timeline from Mercer's last verified appearance at the subway entrance to the unauthorized login at 11:45 p.m. to the sighting of the black sedan. He listed the 37 trades, the compliance drafts, the forged passport, the decoy ticket. He wrote of Clara's testimony, Adrian Cole's confession, and the conviction of Brandt. At the bottom of the report, he left one line blank: the field marked "body recovered." He could not fill it. Weeks passed, and public interest faded. The markets surged on. The skyscrapers hummed with new deals, and Mercer's name became a cautionary whisper. Within the firm, brokers avoided speaking of him. Files were archived, plaques polished. Business resumed. But in Clara's apartment, absence lingered. She kept Daniel's planner on the table, the pen still clipped inside, as though he might return to finish his notes. She sometimes touched the place where his phone had been found, its battery drained, its silence louder than any call. On a cold evening, she visited Hale at the precinct. She asked if he believed Daniel had chosen his fate. Hale paused before answering. "I think he tried to fight with the only weapon he had, numbers. But numbers don't protect you when men like Brandt are determined to erase you." Clara nodded, not in agreement, but in weary understanding. The official record closed with Brandt's sentencing. Yet Hale knew Mercer's story remained unresolved. The detective kept a copy of the USB's directory printed on paper, folded into his notebook, not as evidence, but as reminder. Each line of numbers, each timestamp, was a voice Mercer left behind. In the federal vault, under humming fluorescent lights, the silver USB rested in its sealed bag. It no longer glowed with the urgency of discovery. It waited, silent, an artifact transformed into history. And if anyone opened the box years later, they would see the object that began it all, small, scratched, ordinary, yet heavy enough to pull a man from the world. In the stillness of that vault, the case's echo remained. The USB gleamed faintly, a cold witness to absence.